Hey everybody, I just want to share a story from one of C.S. Lewis's books. And this story, it paints an amazing picture of what it looks like when somebody realizes the ugliness of who they are and how after trying to fix it themselves, they finally realize that their only hope is a complete surrender and trust in God to do what they can't do. And it's a wonderful story. And it's about a boy named Eustace. So C.S. Lewis wrote a book, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. And in this book, there is a boy whose name is Eustace. And Eustace is selfish and greedy. And he's not pleasant to be around, and he only considers himself, and his friends are constantly irritated by him. And so what happens in the story is Eustace, on one of the travels with his friends, he actually finds a field of treasure, and he finds this hidden treasure, a great fortune. And he's amazed at all of this treasure, and he's overjoyed at his great luck. And he's so happy. He starts to think of how he can keep the treasure for himself, and he falls asleep, blissful. And what happens is he wakes up not as a boy any longer, but he wakes up and he realizes he's turned into a dragon. And he realizes that he feels a sharp pain in his arm, and he looks and he sees that it's because there was a golden bracelet that he had put on before as a boy, but now it's constricting his dragon arm and giving him a huge amount of pain. And he thinks of how he needs to go and find his friends, but he realizes that he's a dragon now, and that people would run from him. He'd be excluded from human company, that he was all alone. He was cut off. Realizing all of this and feeling the intense pain in his arm, he starts to weep. And a great king, Aslan, who is the king of all the land, and he's actually a magnificent lion. The Lion King actually comes and sees Eustace cry. And with great mercy, great compassion, he leads Eustace to a mountain where there is a meadow. And in the center of the meadow, there is a well. He leads Eustace to the well. And Eustace looks into the well and sees the beautiful clear water at the bottom of it, and he thinks, oh, if only I could fit into this well, the water would actually bring some soothing and relief to my painful arm. And Aslan says to him, you will need to be undressed first. And so the dragon, Eustace, the dragon boy, he thinks, I don't understand what Aslan means. What does he mean undressed? And after a moment of thinking, he realizes, oh, what Aslan means for me is that I'm a dragon and I've got skin. And just like snakes shed their skin, I can shed my skin. So that must be what he means. I can shed my skin, I can get into the water, and I can get some relief. And so he starts to think, yeah, I can do this. So he starts tearing at his skin, trying to rip the skin off, rip his dragon skin off. And so what happens is he rips off one layer, and only to find that there's another layer underneath. And so he keeps ripping, and he tries to rip the second layer off. And he finds that after he rips that second layer off, there's still another layer. And he resolves to continue, but after 3 layers, he realizes that all of his efforts are useless. It hasn't been working. And that he'll never be able to get his skin off, that it's all in vain. He can't get rid of his skin. He'll never become a boy again. He'll never be able to get into the water to be clean. And he's absolutely hopeless. And Aslan says to him, "You will have to let me undress you." And Eustace the dragon was scared and afraid, seeing the lion's claws. But he thought, "I'm desperate. I have no other way." He was so desperate that even though he was afraid, he laid down on his back. And he allowed the lion to take off his skin. And as he lay there, he felt the first tear, where Aslan, the lion's claws, went in, and he felt it was so deep that it went straight to his heart. And it was so painful. But the lion pulled that first layer off, and the dragon was in such pain that the only thing that made him able to keep going and that gave him some hope is that there was such a relief when the skin was finally off. But the process was painful. The lion just kept going and ripping off the skin. And the dragon looked, and he saw on the ground the skin. And he thought that he had ripped the skin off before, but he realized that before it didn't hurt. Now it was hurting, but now it was working. Now the skin on the ground was darker and thicker, and it looked like really his skin was being torn off. And finally it was finished, and he lay there on the ground. And he was like a peeled twig, a peeled fresh twig. He was small, and he was peeled, and he felt very vulnerable and very soft. And the lion came and took Eustace. And it felt painful to be grabbed by the lion's claws. But the lion took him and threw him into the water. And the water made a sound, and it spat. But then it calmed down, and the water became so comfortable and wonderful for Eustace, and he felt such a relief and so much peace. And he realized that his arm wasn't hurting anymore. And he looked, and he saw that he was now a boy. And in his joy, he started splashing around and realizing that he was a boy now. He wasn't a dragon anymore. And after a while, the lion took him out of the well and dressed Eustace in new clothes. And that story really does show what it's like for us when we realize that we've got stuff in our hearts that is so ugly, stuff in our hearts that really ruins our relationships, isolates us, drives us away from relationships. The ugliness on the inside, the selfishness inside that makes it so difficult for us to have company. The stuff that we're so ashamed of. And realizing this, often the only way that we realize how ugly we are on the inside is that we see the fruit in our lives. We see the result in our lives. We see the fights. We see the arguments. We see the conflict. We see the loneliness. We see the depression. We see the things that stop us from relationship and, well, the results of this stuff on the inside. And usually when we get angry, when we react strongly and that ugly side comes out, usually we're more disgusted by the result, by the fruit of what comes out, than by the source. And so we try to change ourselves, and we try to fix it, and we really try to do better. We really try not to get angry. We really try to be patient. We really try to be loving. But it becomes a cycle of trying and failing. The issues remain. The issues are still there. It's so humbling to realize in the end that we've still got that stuff there, that it's not changing. But some of us, we realize that actually, wait a minute, God wants to do something deeper. And the truth is, he does. He wants to do something deeper in us. He wants something more at our core than we ever realized. He's the one who can take the dragon skin off, not us. When we try, it seems to make ourselves feel better for a bit because we're working and we're doing something, we're active. But in fact, it's in vain because we can't take off our dragon skin. But in his love, he wants to do something deeper, and he wants to take that skin right off. But all he asks is a surrender. All he asks is for us to let him do it, to let him, with the power of his strength, go straight to the heart and remove that selfish nature, remove that ugly side. And we may be scared to allow Jesus to do this to us. It may seem incredibly vulnerable, but the pain of letting God do this in us, the question is it worth it? Well, death will always feel like dying. It will always feel like death for us to finally say, yeah, there is nothing I can do. I really need you, Jesus. It will always feel painful, but the result is a new life. The result is a resurrection. And yes, the pain will be there, but it will be so worth it. And he is the one who makes us who we were always meant to be, and who finally dresses us in new clothes, giving us a new heart and a new life. And so, will you let him love you by doing something for you that you can't do for yourself? Will you see the dragon? It's hard to see it, but in seeing it, there is a hope that we will let him undress us, take off the dragon skin, make us new, make us into children who can walk with him, our Maker.